with that, I guess Jackie's going to speak for a little bit, and then we're going to open it up into some sort of discussion and see where it goes. So.
Right, I like that idea that he's going to speak a little bit, because you got to stop people like me, like this lady, Mary Ann, like James, right? Because these are three people who sometimes have a lot to say. But thanks so much for coming here. And what we're going to look at really is just a couple of things. First of all, there's some confusion with people as to what drones, what are drones. Remember Chris, the first person who made the flyer up for you? They had one of the toy drones on the flyer, and I say, Chris, how about changing that to the Predator? Because everyone kind of looks at the drones that fly over recreational areas or used in sporting events, etc. But we're talking about bad drones. We're talking about killer drones. This is what it's all about here. And the one that we're focusing on is a drone that is called Predator, but it's actually Predator, the Q9. Right up here is this is the Q9. It's a bigger Predator. There's Predator 1 and Predator 2. And Predator 2 can travel like 3 times faster than Predator 1 and can stay up much longer. I mean, they're crazy. They can stay up like 42 hours in one shot. In fact, there was a little boy from Pakistan that wrote that little poem about how he likes gray skies. And why does he like gray skies? He likes gray skies because the drones usually don't fly when the skies are gray. That's pretty sad commentary, but that constant world, that constant threat. Talk about PTSD. Imagine the villages where they don't know when they're going to live and when they're going to die. They could be, we talk about imminent dangers. They are the people who have the imminent dangers of the United States-made drone hovering over their homes. And is this just stories? We'll talk about that later. Mary Ann will have something to say. James will have something to say about all of this. But we have to remember, for those who don't know an awful lot about, these are unmanned aerial vehicles, right? UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles. And they're operated from consoles and can be operated from thousands of miles away. In fact, we, in a sense, are in a war zone here. The blowback hasn't really developed yet, but it probably will. I mean, we wondered why 2001, the event in September, took place. That was blowback. There weren't too many people predicting it, but it was blowback. There weren't any Iraqi troops or Saudi troops or anyone else in the United States in September 2001. But take a look at it, right? Take a look at where United States forces were in September 2001. Set that aside, that particular point. Let's come around to recent history. In Syracuse, New York, at the Hancock 174th Attack, right? That's what they call themselves, right? The 174th Attack Squadron. It's really, if you've gone out of Syracuse, anybody ever go to Syracuse Airport? Did you ever travel out? Well, you may not be aware of it, but on the far side of that is where the drone base is. And this is where assassinations take place. And all of you guys remember from probably your middle school or high school history about the Magna Carta, when finally in the Western world, individuals were able to have a trial. And in high school, you probably studied the Latin word habeas corpus, to present the body, not a dead body, but the person before a judge, because you're charged with a particular crime. There'll be a hearing, right? There'll be a trial. And if you're convicted, you can have an appeal. Well, this is outside of the judicial world that we're operating in this democratic country. This country is justice. It's extrajudicial, outside of judicial control. And this extrajudicial idea is that we develop what they call baseball cards. That's what they call them in the group that does surveillance Intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance is what it is, right? The IRS. The intelligence people come up with who the enemy happens to be in various countries around the world. And keep in mind that it's just not Afghanistan and Iraq, Pakistan. We have been hitting, we know of 7 countries where people have been killed. And almost always they're civilians, almost always. They do hit so-called bad guys, maybe, at least they claim they're bad guys. But in these particular countries, the individuals who are targeted with these baseball cards, these are kept by the crew, by the intelligence men and the crew of individuals who go about trying to find out where these people are with drones, something like this, to do the surveillance. They check and they eventually hone in with the camera. Then they'll bring in if they want to do a kill, they'll bring in the Q9 Reaper. And notice the names, right? The Reaper, the Predator, Peacemaker, right? These are sort of sinister, isn't it, what they have called these weapons. The main missile, however, of the Predator drone is not the drone that kills. It's the missile, and the missile is called Hellfire. It's a Hellfire missile that is used to kill people. And they're right on board that, if you get up close enough, you'll be able to see under the wings. The wings are like 66 feet long. And this room is what, maybe 30 feet long? So it's a pretty big, about 3 times the length of this room. Anyway, the individuals are pinpointed then, right, by camera. Supposedly they can tell them, they can tell who they are, but where do they find them? How do they find these people? Usually they use cell phones. The cell phone becomes the target, or computers, but usually cell phones. Once they get the cell phone, they can hone in on the individual. And of course, families, especially poor families, they trade the phone, right? It goes all over the place. Trump phones are exchanged back and forth. And so very often when they think they're getting the bad guy, they're getting a lot of civilians. And we know, of course, we have admitted with this, not a drone, well, there were some drone hits in this most recent attack in Yemen. Wasn't it in January when the SEALs went in? And they made a big hero out of that poor guy, that the American, right, that was killed. What about the poor 26 civilians who were killed in that attack? Most of them were kids. Most of them under 13 years of age, right? And yet, and the father knew, didn't he? The father wouldn't go to Trump's, gathering there at the inauguration. The father said to him, no part, but they're able to talk the mother into this patriotism thing. And this is what you deal with probably at home with your parents, with brothers and sisters, with friends at school. Individuals are just so indoctrinated with this idea of justice in the American way, in this so-called exceptionalism. People love Americans, we're exceptional. We surely are, yeah. We surely are exceptional. We have troops in 180 countries around the world, right? We see cars, I saw one a couple days ago with proud to be a Vietnam vet. Maybe some of your relatives were Vietnam vets. Proud to be a Vietnam vet. We killed 3 million Vietnamese. This is exceptional, right? So we're now talking, however, about killing people in a so-called situation where there is imminent danger. That's how they get around the war situation. Obama's lawyers, or Bush's lawyers first, and then Obama. And Bush was pretty bad with killing people with drones. Obama was worse, much worse in the killing. Every Tuesday they would meet and decide who was going to die that particular day, what orders to give to the drone pilots, right, as to who to kill, And so this is what really hurt us, those of us who supported Barack Obama, when he just fell to that great influence of these, handsome generals with all their salad and, this very powerful imprint that Americans have in their mind about the hero. It's the new religion in America, right? It's the warrior worship. And so therefore you're up against a really difficult time. in years to come. But you've got to put a smile on it, because if we're that grim as I am right now, you've got to be optimistic. And I think of my son, he has two boys, one who is an optimist and one is a pessimist. And he went to Cornell, in fact, this guy. And they're both excellent athletes, right? They're really great in baseball, soccer, etc. But the one boy, if he strikes out, it's like it's the worst damn thing that ever happened, Oh, God, he's just all tied into himself. Really just can't believe. So I told him about the story of the two psychologists that I had heard, or the psychologists who had twins. And it was sort of like these two boys. You may have heard this before, but the psychologist, he had one boy who was absolute pessimist. Nothing was good. Everything was on the negative side. And the other boy who was very free and optimistic about it all. So he said, I got to do something. He decided what he'd do would be to get the kid who's the pessimist all the best toys that he could possibly get him in sporting equipment for Christmas. And the other boy, he got a pile of horse shit and put it in his bedroom, right? And so the little the 13-year-old who came down and saw all of those presents, he said, "So what do you think?" Go ahead. He said, "So what do you think?" He said, "That's not the kind of football that I wanted." And he said, "Those toys over there, they all have batteries in them. They're all going to burn right out before long. I don't like the color of that sports shirt right there." So he said he heard some singing and dancing. He went upstairs, and the other boy was dancing around the pile of manure. And he said, "What's going on? You're singing and dancing." He said, "Hey, there's got to be a pony in there somewhere." So that's the point. I guess the point is that we've got to think positive about it. And I think that we'll be getting in a few minutes in the discussion here. We'll get into a point or two about how you can, in college and out of college, because what we're going to talk about is a visionary idea, a visionary plan, not something that you call up your congressman. Well, you know what they do anyway. But it's not going to happen right away. But it's an attitudinal, it's a cultural kind of attitude with an optimistic, not a pessimistic, but an optimistic possibility there that we'll work with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Mary Ann and I'm going to ask James to tell us something about what they have learned at the 174th Attack Squadron, which is only, 45 minutes away from here, right? And the local people think it's just fine. I happen to be from the Catholic tradition, and it took me 4 years to go in to get an appointment with the Bishop of Syracuse. And I went there. Ed Canan was in the group. There were 5 or 6 of us. And I said to the bishop, you could walk to where assassinations are taking place in Syracuse. You could actually walk to that base. What do you think about the morality, if nothing else? Forget about the legality for a minute. What about just the basic morality? He said, I haven't made up my mind on that yet. I said, we've been sending you information for 4 years now. He said, you know what? He said, there are a lot of Catholics that work up there at that. So there's already this, in probably the largest religious denomination is the Catholics in the Syracuse area. And yet the bishop himself will not say a word about assassinations that are plotted, planned, executed. The triggers are being pulled, right? At a distance where he could actually walk. He could walk up there. He's mad at me now because I've said all this on television, and he doesn't want to talk to me again. He said, "I thought." Yeah. But what do you think, Mary Ann? Mary Ann, by the way, if you don't know Mary Ann Grady, Mary Ann had the longest sentence so far at Hancock.
You did more than
well,
I did.
I served more time, but she served quite a bit, almost as much as she has. I have the dubious distinction of serving more time.
You did
but
60
she was given.
days. I
Listen
only
to
did
this.
49.
She was given a year sentence for stepping over a line because in front of the Hancock drone assassination base, They claim now, the Air Force, that they own halfway out on a road called Malone Road. So Mary Ann, what is it? Malloy Road. Mary Ann was going up to take a photograph of some people who were doing an activity and tell them what happened. You'd stepped over the line, right?
Yes.
Tell them what happened.
So I had already, well, first of all, the colonel of the military base, Colonel Earl A. Evans, when a bunch of us had done, 17 of us had done our second big action, and we went to the 3 gates. And so when we got to court, they arrested us and they brought us to the little town court. They said, they started reading this piece of paper, and it was like a domestic violence order of protection, and we were like, who's this being given by and for us? And it turns out it was the military base commander that was he was given an order of protection on his own behalf by the local judge in order to keep us away from the base. And so if we violated this order, then we would be challenged or charged with what they call
contempt of a court order.
Criminal contempt 2, which is, it's a misdemeanor, which means you can go to jail for a year. So it was pretty heavy duty. So I was one of the 17 of the original group that got this. So my sister Ellen, who may come in the door any minute, and then a couple of priests. It was Ash Wednesday. It was the Catholic flavor of the Gandhian waves that day, because it was Ash Wednesday, So they had poured a few ashes on the ground, and I took it upon myself to go over and get my sister's new cell phone, her iPhone rather, and I had my camera and I was taking pictures because I also send out press releases. So I get out there and I'm, by the way, if you look at the, when you pull up to a stop sign, you know how there's that white line on the road? And if you step beyond the white line, you're in the crosswalk. Well, all 8 of the protesters that day were in the crosswalk. And then they poured the ashes out beyond them, and then I was out beyond the ashes. So where was I? I was out in the roadway. So I crossed the street and I came back, I took some more photos, and I left. And I told everybody that day, here, take my phone number, write it on your arm, because a lot of times the cops take your papers out of your pockets and they throw them away so you don't have your contact information to get a ride home. So I said, write my phone number, I'll pick you up after you get arrested. So, and I said, I'm not a part of the group because I have an order of protection. So I leave and I'm going down the road to this cafe to get a cup of coffee, because now my next job is to go pick them up. And the cops were taking them away. And I had left them way before they give the warning. And I get a squad car coming over and picks me up. And I said, what are you doing? And they said, you violated your order of protection. And I said, how? Well, I didn't know until I was in the courtroom being taken away in handcuffs. Our friend Mark Carver gets up and he says, Judge, where is the base boundary? And the judge says, the double yellow line in the middle of the road.
Mary Ann, explain to them order of protection, because they're all thinking the order of protection, or most people of the usual order of protection.
Yeah, it's a stay away order also. It's, domestic violence stay away order. And first of all, I've never dealt with any of that in my life, and I've never dealt with property lines. I'm from New York City. I'm from the Bronx. I don't know this stuff, So anyway, I was quite shocked. And then I go to trial, and you can look it up on YouTube. Go Google my name, and you'll see the judge sentenced me to 1 year in jail for taking photos, being out in the roadway. So I trumped Jack's sentence of 3 months. He did the 60 days. I only did 49 because I got bumped out on bail.
They're waiting for you. Yeah. You may be
anyway, so I'm out on. So I went to the bailiff to go pay, my friends paid my bail, and I went to the bailiff guy. I said, how much do you think they charged me? He goes, maybe $300. I said, try $5,000. I'm like such a threat, Anyway, I mean, it's ridiculous. But the little town of DeWitt, which is connected to the town where the front gate is of the base, they are in collusion, or have been, up until recently, they may be changing their tune. They have been sending people to jail. But I think what we've done, it backfired on them, by the way, because my case went around the world. It went on Facebook, it went on Huffington Post and NPR, and anyway, it went out there. And now the judge is, I think, a little sorry for what he's done.
So maybe James could kind of tell what...
Here's my sister Ellen, the
Okay.
one I was taking the photos of. The other, yeah.
James, why don't you tell folks about what some of these situations you have been involved in?
Okay, well, I can start off first. I'm a pessimist. You know, I see the glass is half empty. I think sometimes we get too caught up in these bullshit charges that they put on us instead of what's happening at the other end of those missiles that they're guiding from Hancock base. They charge us with disorderly conduct and contempt of a court order. This is like from the 1920s when Al Capone and Frank Nitti used to go to court and they would kill the witnesses. You know, they would threaten witnesses. So they would put orders of protection, okay, for the witnesses against the defendants. And we're the defendants. So somehow they have that convoluted to the effect that we are a threat to this military-based commander. I mean, in Marion Stroud, a guy stood up and her lawyer asked, "Is she a threat to you?" And he said, "I don't consider her or any of them a threat. I just want to keep them away from my base."
Right. He said he didn't even know me.
I believe that they look at us do our actions, and then they'll look at the films and see what charges can they put on us to deter us from coming. And these charges are deterrence and a smoke screen. They're killing people.
Right.
The Commander Semmel, I think, at one time said that they search and attack militants. I don't know the terminology that they use for them on a 24-hour, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day basis. That's what that base is set up to do. And I don't think it was called, Jack, the assassination wing. It's the attack wing, the 174th attack wing. And there are no bad guys for us to get. A target of assassination is a war crime. Doesn't matter who it is. You can't sit over here and decide somebody's an enemy to you and decide to eliminate him without some, he has a process to go through. It's called extrajudicial killing. They have signature strikes where they just observe from thermal cameras little bodies meeting together at certain times, certain places, and I don't know what the formula is, because when Obama, who I think was a great president, but I'm going to read you a poem I wrote about Mr. Obama, I was pretty upset with him. But, you know, they have a secret policy. I don't know how they determined that these people are enemies, and even if they are, they still don't have a right to attack them without going to the United Nations Security Council and getting a permission for military action anywhere. It's a war crime. That's what all that weapons of mass destruction BS was about. They were trying to get a sanction to go into Iraq. When they went into Iraq to look for the weapons, they were committing a war crime. Every time they send a missile out, they're not checking with the UN Security Council. Every time they do it, it's a war crime. Yes. Okay? So that's something that really has to be established. There aren't any bad guys. I've heard this terminology, yeah, we're trying to get bad guys, and there's collateral damage, you know, an accident, which is kind of, it's mind-boggling, because like they said, every Tuesday they decide where they're going to get, and they estimate, you know, what the collateral damage is going to be, whether it's in a rural area or urban area. And when you start to calculate how many people you're going to kill, it kind of takes away the thing of it being an accident at that point. You just really don't understand how many people that you do kill. And before Ellen gets started, because I know she's going to take a minute, I'm going to read this poem I wrote for her dad and her husband, okay, and her dad also.
Thank you.
This was after I went up and to a Catholic worker meeting. I'm not Catholic, but I went to a Catholic worker meeting and saw what I thought were just bodies that were completely destroyed, just torn asunder, okay? and I went to Pakistan too, and I saw some of these Hellfire missiles, that the remnants of them, and to see like that thick 1.5-inch steel just ripped, like in a room with it just sitting there, it makes you feel really uncomfortable to think, what in the hell could have exploded this steel container like that, okay? But yeah, I wrote a poem, it's called Deadly Makeover. Can I do it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Why don't you do it?
It's about Barack Obama. I don't know if you know who Reverend Wright is, but okay, good. I see enough heads nodding. Says, are you white? Are you black? Are you black and think you white? Well, why'd you stick a knife in the back of the Reverend Jeremiah Wright? It was a deadly makeover, but I understand. Politics makes strange bedfellows, they say, but how much of that game was you planning to play? You won the election, you sent Bush back to the South, but Barack, is that Cheney's dick in your mouth? I read the audacity of hope. You invited me to there, that this shit could be fair. Now some time has passed, I feel played like a dope, and I'm talking to you. I said I'm talking to you because I voted for you, and I had never, ever voted before. Now you got blood on my hands. You got blood on my hands, man. You got blood on my hands, and you got blood on my door. It takes time to turn the huge of a state. That's an empty refrain when you're left dead in its wake, and the death of our own cuts too close to the bone. So we can send in the drones. We can capitalize on our high-tech advantage. Collateral damage will be easy to manage if the ones that we kill, if they don't look like us. We can still play these fools. We can still keep their trust. We can play them, delay them, and we can leave them for dead. We can keep this same monster, just switch up the head. But you said you won the election and sent Bush back to the South. Barack, what you doing? I'm gonna tell Michelle, you can't unring that bell, Barack. What you doing? Back up, man, you should leave me alone. I got a dream. I know that you got a drone. And I know in Harvard you was head of your class, but if you do after you drove me, you can kiss my black ass. You say your name is Barack Obama, but Barack means blessing, and I'm confessing it don't feel like you believe in karma. So that was from Barack.
I just want to say that James he was just on trial for what we called the big books action, that Ellen was very instrumental in getting these incredible books. And James had the jury, which by the way acquitted them, the four, he had the jury in tears and laughing.
They were in tears because we showed them pictures of children that had been blown up, okay? They were laughing because I told a little story about my grandson who just ran out. That was pretty funny, you know, but they were in tears. When like I said, I had been there. I met drone victims. I met Kareem Khan. I'm gonna let Ellen take this with the big books because that was her idea, to bring these books to inform the soldiers and the police that we had an absolute a duty to be there, okay? And she'll get into all of that. I might have lost my point, but she'll pick it up.
You
did great.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ellen Grady. I live here in Ithaca. I'm part of the Ithaca Catholic Worker community, and I'm sorry to have missed the beginning of this. I have, sort of grown up in this town and couldn't figure out where this building was.
You're not alone.
So anyway, and also I was doing some prep work for another action that we're going to do at the drone base. So I have paint on me from that, but. So I'm sorry to have missed what was said already.
No, I think what James would just like you to tell something about.
That's what I was going to talk about, the big book. So we've been doing these actions since 2011 or 2010 at the drone base when this group of us discovered that there were drones being piloted and maintained and serviced there at Hancock. So. We have been going back and forth, done some different kinds of actions. The first big action was the Hancock 38, and there were 38 of us arrested for doing a die-in in the driveway. And we all went to trial, and the former Attorney General Ramsey Clark testified at our trial to testify about the illegality of using these drones. And about the international laws that are being violated by the use of these drones. It was a really great trial, and yet the judge found us guilty. And that was a bench trial, so we only had a violation charges, and so it was a bench trial. And since then, we've had several other kinds of bench trials, and each time we have a bench trial, we get found guilty. The judge says these international law things are not relevant to the charges that we have, and we don't really get to talk about it. Or and in Jack's case, who did have a jury trial, and my sister Marianne's case in the jury trial, they were able to talk a little bit about international law, but we can never bring any more expert witnesses into the courtroom. After Ramsey came, they do not allow us to have those people. And it's a shame it was wasted on the judge, because the judge is not going to ever rule in our favor. But if a jury heard it, they might feel differently. And so after several of these trials, and total frustration about knowing that there are these laws that would prevent these drones from flying and being used the way they're being used, it felt like, what do we do? And so it felt like, well, why don't we block the driveway of this base with those international laws? So we made a giant 6 foot, 7 foot tall replica of the UN Charter. We made a giant replica of Jeremy Scahill's book, Dirty Wars. We made a giant replica of this study that came out of Stanford and NYU it's called Living Under Drones, and it's about the situation in Pakistan. And then a giant replica of a report that came out of Reprieve, this organization out of England, and it's called You Never Die Twice. And it's about what is the number? It's like for every one target that we say we kill, there's 9 people or 10 people are killed because of it. So anyway, so we made these 7 foot tall, 5 feet wide books, and we rented a U-Haul truck, and we put our books in the truck, and then we drove up to the base, and we unloaded we just watched this at the trial, so it was making me laugh, because we looked like little ants carrying these big books. And we set the books down. But not only did we bring those things with us, which would be evidence about why we think that what's going on there is illegal, we also brought a quote from a giant quote. Sorry to keep whacking my arms. Of the U.S. Constitution, Article 6 of the Constitution, which states every treaty that is signed becomes the supreme law of the land, and that every judge has to uphold these laws, right? And anyway, we blocked the gates, and the police just did not know what to do with it. And I'm sorry I don't have images of it with me, because they're really fun. But I mean, like, to project them up, because it would be fun to see them. So it was great for us to be standing there with them, and it was actually quite powerful to feel that we had that backing. Like, we're supposed to be here in this driveway. We're supposed to be blocking this illegal activity.
Well, tell us what happened.
And so what I was going to say is, one of the fun images, though, is later on they came and arrested. They arrested, what was it? There were like 7.
7.
Yep, 7 people who were arrested of the group. They stayed with the books, and but we said we didn't want the books back, and they said, well, you can't have the books back because they're evidence. And we were like, yes, that's what we want. We want that evidence.
Imagine having to cart all that evidence.
We had one friend that could not stop laughing because he was thinking about what's this going to look like in the courtroom with these 7 foot things.
But what was really fun was to watch the soldiers carrying dirty wars. Like, really, literally, they're carrying it like this.
I'm going to pass my cell phone around with the photos.
Anyway, so 2 years later, those guys went to trial, and they were facing
5 of us did. 2, Julianne and
Right,
Bev.
Julianne
Bev.
and Bev, there were 2 women in the group. The 2 women were, had these orders of protection that Marianne talked about, so they have a second serious charge. But James and these other guys did not have orders of protection, or their orders of protection had expired by that point.
Right.
So they went to trial facing a charge called obstruction of governmental administration, which carries a maximum year sentence if you're found guilty. The judge can sentence you to that much, and then 3 misdemeanors, and 2 disorderly conducts and 1 trespass charge. Anyway, it was in preparation for the trial that we realized, was like, wait a minute, we have all of the evidence, because the charge, in the charge, it says that you have to have the intent to do a criminal act, right? And they could speak very clearly, and their books and all of the material that they had with them spoke to their intent, that they were not there to be criminal, but to uphold the law, and to call the base to uphold law, and to call the courts to uphold the law. So anyway, these guys had a great trial. They presented a lot of really great information. As you just heard, James was amazing in his presentation, and very moving, and especially spoke, I think, so clearly of the connection of being, as you said, I'm a black man, I live in this country, I know whose life is more precious in this country, and you see that extended to, and who's being killed in the foreign wars. And it was quite powerful. And anyway, the jury deliberated for 40 minutes. And whenever you have a short kind of deliberation like that, especially for several charges, you usually are getting a guilty verdict. So we all came back from the room. It was like, oh my God, I have a verdict already. And it was unanimous not guilty verdict. And it was really amazing.
Huge.
Because I think that, I mean, there were many reasons, but the argument about being able to talk about these international agreements and presenting them to the juries and explaining this. Anyway, it was quite moving.
And just one quick point, because Ellen keeps saying we blocked the driveway. We did not. As soon as we come, they closed the gate. We used that area to display signs to explain to the public what we're doing there. Very, very important distinction.
Right. And where they stood is out by, like I said, out beyond that white line on the road. So it's out by the intersection. And meanwhile, there's like 7 cars that you have to get up to the main gate, which they lock every time we come.
And if I can just, one quick point about dirty wars, something I found really troublesome. There's an attack called the TADS. I think the acronym is TADS. Terror Attack Disruption Strike is what it means. And that means that if there's a military age male in an area, I don't know exactly what the parameters are, and Al-Qaeda is recruiting in that area, and not knowing whether they are going to approach this guy, and he may join them, he may not. Before that even happens, he's a legitimate target. It's called a terror attack disruption strike. It's in dirty wars, and it came from a CIA official to Jeremy Scahill. It's like extrajudicial killing on steroids. And about those signature strikes, when they see these people with these thermal cameras, they've blown up a number of wedding parties, people waiting at bus stops. It tears at the fabric of community. You know, people become afraid to even come together. They know that could identify them. And one last quick point, when I was in Pakistan, I was up near Waziristan, not exactly there, but the methodology that I understood explained to me by the ambassador to Pakistan. He spoke with us too, and I forget his name, Richard. well, I'm not going to get into the thing. I went with Cold Pink, and they called him Dick. When we were up in Waziristan, they had chips. They have these people that work for them, the army, informants, and they give them chips, and they place these chips down near where an attack, where they want an attack, near a person's house or something like this. And they can be identified by the drones as targets. Well, what I understood from being in this camp up near Waziristan was that you can buy these chips for $1,000 American. You can get a chip, and a lot of people don't have that kind of money. I mean, when we were in Islamabad to take a taxi downtown, come back, shop, and bring you back, it costs $1. You know, it costs about $1. So for $1,000, you can buy a chip. And if you've got some sort of feud or something like that with somebody, you can place this chip near their house, and they're gotten rid of. And who's going to question a drone strike? There are so many.
Right, that's a good point. And we're dealing with civil wars here, where there are those animosities between various sanctions or factions, I should say. But the point is, I think what we've got to do is move on. We want to get out of here by 6 o'clock. But I think there are a couple of important points to make here. And that is, to try to draw in some views from the rest of you, do you believe, can you feel that maybe there are some positive issues involved in the assassinations? So that's what it is. I might have said, assassination instead of attack, but there are assassinations. Do you believe that that there are some benefits? Can you see of some benefits in eliminating individuals who have been targeted as the dangerous people to the security of the United States? Anybody believe that? Damn socialists. Won't fall for the big. All right, okay, so we're assuming then that you don't accept that. What are the alternatives then?
Yeah, I think David, you had a great question last night. I thought. I mean, I think you should.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, in certain cases, if there is someone like an imminent danger in terms of for the United States, which, considering our expansive power and all that, is not really an issue from any point of view. But I think that if you can prevent other people from dying by taking out a specific individual, maybe like Saddam Hussein or Bin Laden, I think that in certain cases like that, where you're absolutely sure, then yes. But I think that the idea of kind of using technology as a end-all situation for any sort of problem that you have in a certain region or anywhere in the world is extremely reckless.
Can I say, I saw Jill Stein on television, and they asked her, if we had the coordinates for al-Baghdadi, the head of ISIS, would you allow the strike? And she said, I can't do that, it's a war crime. Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is you see war crimes are acceptable in certain situations if this guy, in some sort of, what did Danny call it, anticipatory self-defense, you can take him out. What if people started bombing people in this country because for anticipatory? Yeah. Well, with drone strikes.
But, yeah, I understand that we're talking about drones here, and that's not something that I agree with. But I think that if
but to save lives, you're saying you could.
Right. I'm not. If you have to consider in the civilian lives as well, then obviously not, because that just turns everyone into a villain. Mm-hmm. But I think that in certain scenarios, there are laws, self-defense laws, things like that, where you can use action to prevent other action. I mean, there's a lot of philosophical questions that come out there. Exactly. Yes. Okay.
Well, what are some of the other possibilities? Then, are there any other possibilities other than taking them out? The rhetorical question, of an individual who is this very dangerous. But beyond
Could I just say one more thing quickly, Jack?
Say more than
I'm sorry, but you remember Bin Laden? They had Bin Laden. They had him unarmed, in a room with a bunch of Navy SEALs, and they killed him. They could have brought him back and taken him to trial. I saw people dancing in the street all over this country. They were celebrating a war crime, and this man could have been captured. I would have liked to hear what had him brought to court and hear what he had to say, it's kind of suspicious, almost gangster-like, you know, to assassinate him when you had him, you know, completely under your control.
My name's Alana Hedley. I'm with the Young Democratic Socialists. So, but anyway, yeah, I think that there are for sure like some really horrible people here and around the world. But that's what these international laws are in place for, like you're saying. So you can bring them in. We can do that. We just choose not to. And not only is the morality of that like egregious, but I'm no expert in military strategy, but just taking out the head of the snake, clearly it hasn't done anything because we're still in these endless wars over and over again. And so that strategy is not working for us. And I think the dominant strategy we need to be using is aid and not just like throwing money or water bottles at them. But we're not even letting refugees in. And even when we technically are, it takes like, oh God, how many, like at least a year, if not longer, to get accepted.
Unless
and
you're
so we
Canadian.
can't pretend, right, we can't pretend to care about the people there, abroad in these foreign wars, or here if we're not even taking in refugees. And so there's that just double insult, and it's just clear to me that that is not the actual intention, you know, to save lives. It's about enforcing our power and our dominance around the world.
And war is profitable. You know, lots of weapons manufacturers are, I'm sure, vacationing and probably sending some ships to Mars to see, explore that after they tear this planet up.
So what are our alternatives? So what, some of you people who are students, what other alternatives can you think of that may turn things around? We need a transformation, right? That's what we're supposed to be talking about tonight too, is what sort of cultural transformation? A lot of what we're talking about here, you can read on the internet, you can see on television, you can talk about, etc. But what are the answers? Are there any? We told a little line about being an optimist, and James says he's a pessimist, but I'm sure he would be optimistic in some ways if he was available, if he was to do a bit more reading on the Global Marshall Plan. There is one individual in the United States House of Representatives who has led, has been successful in leading about 70 other progressives to sign on to a resolution. Resolutions are just resolutions, they're not laws. But it's called the Global Marshall Plan. Did you study the Marshall Plan in high school and college? Some people say it was just for the US benefit, etc. But the one congressional Muslim, well, there are two actually, but one isn't very active, is Keith Ellison. Keith Ellison from Minnesota. Keith Ellison has been teaming up with Rabbi Michael Lerner of California, progressive rabbi, to really try to push, and this is not just this year, they've been doing it for almost 10 years. It's a hard deal to deal with. I've been in Congress visiting congressional offices, including Keith Ellison, some really good people. He's talking to Rabbi Michael Lerner. He said, don't bother going in to the Republicans because there's no chance. So you're looking at the future. You're looking at a visionary kind of thing. And you're young. If you could only get that transition, that cultural transition, to start thinking about assisting the very poor. Because here is the United States that caused this great migration throughout the Middle East. We're talking about millions of people displaced in Iraq alone, 2 million people displaced from their homes. The Canadians were the only ones taking in Syrians, and that was just part of the fireball that spread after the shock and awe of Iraq, the attacks upon Afghanistan, drone attacks on Libya, Yemen, etc. And the United States, they don't want part of it. We want to have our safe situation here, right? So we have our comfortable life. And yet the Canadians live a pretty comfortable life, and they have taken 25,000 Syrians in this past year. Some of these families who could tell you an awful lot about drones, because we're using drones in Syria, Libya, Yemen, Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia. You're right on. These are all dark-skinned people, friends. These are all Muslim countries, right? So there's no mystery about this whole thing. And right locally here, you have right down the road from here, Lockheed Martin, that produces the Hellfire missiles, right? The people up here in Syracuse, huge Lockheed plant. Over in Rome, down in Pennsylvania, you drive by the town when you go down 81, another line. They're all over the country. It's the corporate military complex, of course, and how do you get away from that? You guys are going to have an awful lot to do to try to convince young men and women to get into positions of government and push for some sort of equality that could come from the Global Marshall Plan, because it worked back in after post-World War II. As a young infantryman, I'm talking as a member of the Veterans for Peace, as a young infantryman in 1955, I looked across the Danube and it was totally destroyed. Everything was gone. On the other side, cranes were all over the place building up that part of Austria. Austria became one of the richest countries in the world, not powerfully in terms of the military, because they learned their lesson. This was Adolf Hitler's home, right? Austria. And now they have become one of the most progressive countries in the world. And the United States really has to take a lot of credit for that. There's no doubt about it. And people say, yeah, but the Americans got rich. Sure they did. They sold a lot of this stuff. But Europe got back on its feet. Africa needs help. And the Europeans are now talking about an African global Marshall Plan, or an African Marshall Plan type situation. Americans are sitting back, and what are they doing? $54 billion, $52 billion in the budget on top of the hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars being spent. This is a war budget. We are into a war budget. Just today, your president, well, the president, I should say, the president said that we are going to decimate ISIS, right? Well, he's got $52 more billion on top of the $700 billion already that's into the program. Is this going to be the answer? The visionary thing is that you've got to think about supporting, and Chris, if you could pass around that resolution, I would appreciate it. The resolution that's coming out, is it already around?
Yes, I think.
Good. The resolution here, you can go online. You guys, I don't have to tell you what to do. Go online and write a note to Keith Ellison. He's a good guy. He should have become the Democratic chairperson.
Right.
And of course, he was defeated. So now he's the co-chair, supposedly. But he's a guy with a sense of young people and a change away from this terrible mess that we have in the House of Representatives and in the Senate as well. So if you can think of down the road, 10, 20 years from now, possibly things can happen, but you've got to start doing some push, and to pick up the phone or to send an email to Keith Ellison and say, hey, we're right with you, pal. This is what we want. And stay with the global Marshall Plan until Americans finally learn that that's about the only answer to it. Well, thanks much for coming.
So
but the last comments?
Two commercial breaks. One is two websites. One is called No Drones, KNOW, No Drones. And then the other one is nodrones.org.
Or .com. No K and OW is com.
.com. Okay, look up .com. You can check both. Anyway, the other one is called Upstate Drone Action. It's my little.
Do that again.
All right. Upstate Drone Action .org. That's less. So those are really two great websites. The latter one is where you'll find a lot of the pictures of the actions and press releases about the actions. And then the second ad is, if you'd like to come and join an action in either capacity, whether you want to be a support person or participate, come and talk.
And then Ithaca Catholic Work Group will be having its usual weekly peace vigil.
Yeah, Louie, tell us about the weekly vigil.
Oh, yeah.
So this is
Helen has some leaflets there with the time and date of our weekly vigil. You can stay along with it says, but we usually stay for only an hour. And Mary Ann used to tell me that more cars pass that CVS place where we stand than read the journal.
Oh yeah, there's 39,000 cars.
So you
pass that corner.
You can make some education, you know.
Yeah.
And
so what do you guys carry?
well, we probably posters that say drones kill children, and James used to always have that one by himself. But, yeah, it was myself, James, and Tom Joyce, and Dan. Started the whole thing about 5 years ago.
And they've been-
Vigiling every Saturday practically. And
At what time?
Saturday morning at 10?
Saturday morning at 10 o'clock.
At the
At the-
CVS.
Down
CVS
here,
corner.
Wegmans.
Thank
You
you.
guys know where Wegmans is,
Yeah,
right? That
and,
little bridge?
Louis, you said, what about him?
Yeah.
Hassan, oh
Yeah, yeah,
man,
he's
Son's
there, too.
always there.
he's our champion.
These guys have been out in the rain and the snow and the
Well,
heat.
not really.
Telling the truth now, right?
I just want to, look, I'm a Vietnam era veteran. I just want to say to young men here, and the women now too, because they're joining up too, don't do it. No, it's just not what we need today, wherever.
Not worth your soul.
But thank you.
Thanks very much.